The GarthCast, a podcast covering Garth Brooks, the news, song and album reviews, Garth Brooks covers by other artists, and more. Keep believing. On the GarthCast for today, Garth reschedules his Cincinnati concert from May to September. This is the third postponement of the Garth Brooks concert in Cincinnati. Our weekly Inside Studio G recap, and another cover of a Garth Brooks song celebrating the amazing work that people are doing covering his music online. First up on the GarthCast, the Garth Brooks concert that was scheduled for May 1st, 2021 in Cincinnati, Ohio, has been rescheduled yet again, and delayed this time until September 18th, 2021. According to Fox 19 out of Cincinnati, tickets already bought will still be valid for the rescheduled date. Officials say Brooks sold 70,000 tickets in 75 minutes for his show in the Queen City. It was the most people ever to show up for a ticket on sale, officials said in a press release. He then set the all-time record for entertainment in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 75 minutes with a sellout of 70,000 seats. This will be Garth's first time playing at Paul Brown Stadium and the only Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia date on the stadium tour. Next up on the GarthCast, our weekly Inside Studio G recap, this time for the show airing March 22nd, 2021. Inside Studio G was a long one this week. It clocked in at 37 minutes and 39 seconds. Garth announced that they'll announce a project and whatever they're doing with Sirius XM Radio on April Fool's Day next week. They announced nothing about that project this week. Garth did say it will be pretty frickin' cool and says he's excited. Samantha knows about the project, but she's not sure that others do, and then it basically became a lot of Ask Garth questions mixed in with some conversation. The Ask Garth questions were as follows. First question asked, not really a question, but a video of a toddler who is dancing to Garth's This Is Garth Brooks 2 special and playing a shaker or a tambourine in a pretend fashion to the music. Second question asked, is there an underlying reason you haven't played Chris Ledoux songs in live shows, etc., and when you're home alone, do you play them, and if so, what are your favorites? Garth responded that Chris Ledoux is just one of those guys who's really hard to do. Singing other stuff, you feel like you have to have an okay grip on it, but Chris's stuff was always harder to do, and he was always more of a fan. Although if he had to pick a favorite, he would say Hooked on an 8-Second Ride. He mentions a song called 10-4 Buddy Come On Back. Everyone, he said, was covering that one. And he says, I don't know, that's a tough one. I'll go to work on it, we'll see, because we should do something live for Chris Ledoux, since our live show is totally stealing everything Chris Ledoux did or tried to do live. They talk a little bit about the news happening next week. Garth mentions a partner in the announcement again, but doesn't actually mention anything with the announcement. The third question asked, if you were told you had to choose between CDs and vinyl, what would you choose and why? He said vinyl, always. I will always pick vinyl, especially if it's an old original analog recording. Anyway, there's just something about it. They're getting comments about the live request anniversary, and people are wishing Garth a happy anniversary. Talking about the live show experience a little, and they mentioned housekeeping and how it sometimes kept the band off guard and they didn't know whether they would have to be running out on stage or not. So it was a live experience, just something that was amazing. Somehow that segued into Garth playing a snippet of the song Wolves. Then Garth mentions that fans of an artist are usually fans of the first 2 to 3 records that an artist makes. And as an artist, you kind of feel that those ones maybe hit and overshadow everything else you do. But with Anthology 2, it's different, going through the back half of the 90s. And he mentions The Change, The Beaches of Cheyenne, Two Pina Coladas, Why Ain't I Runnin'? And then he mentions an assignment. Sticking with the back half of the 90s, let's talk about some songs on those records. Fresh Horses, Sevens, Double Live, Scarecrow. Let's figure out how to celebrate the back half of the 90s next week. Noticeably left out of that discussion of the 4 albums was the Chris Gaines album. It was not even mentioned, but it was in the second half of the 90s. They go on to talk about people coming to the 2014 tour and singing along to every song and having been exposed to Double Live to his music, not the original albums. People are asking when Garth's going to do another Garth Request Live. He kind of sidesteps the answer and says he's ready to get into open-air stadiums or into the sweating and nasty dive bar scene, whichever opens up first, and out of the masked era of things. They show a picture of the Ellen appearance from last week. He talks about the show a bit, mentions Twitch, and then he said he didn't know what to expect. They didn't go through any questions with them beforehand. They just started ripping them off, and he mentions how being with Tricia would make him feel things more fun anyway. They talked a little bit about the Inside Studio T show coming up. They don't have any firm date for it yet, but it is still coming up. The next Ask Garth question was also not really a question, but someone showing their No Fences tour shirt with the I've Seen Him picture on the back. If you remember, Garth mentioned last week how that was the oldest shirt they had made. That was unless you had the Garth Brooks World Tour 1986 shirt from Dupree Sports when he was still in Stillwater. Garth mentions the Dupree Sports shirts that were mentioned last week. They had a 1986 World Tour and a 1987 American Tour tank top. He says he's going to get pictures of those shirts to Samantha this week so they can share them next week. The fifth question asked, are you going to incorporate more Chris Gaines songs into your live performances? So many of us would love it. Garth has a quick, straight-to-the-point response. He says,
no, I will not.
They talk about Chris Gaines a little bit and how there were news stories about it that appeared this week, and I just kind of had to chuckle and wonder, did they see the GarthCast with our mentioning the coverage of the Chris Gaines story last week? He loves that it's the music that survives, and then they talk about the song Lost in You a bit. It was a fun time for him getting to do that stuff, getting to do the music, but it was also right at the time he was losing his mom, trying to figure out what his future was. He knew he was going to have to leave and go home and raise his daughters, so it was kind of a tumultuous time at the same point. The sixth question asked, is there still a chance we'll get the video for Shallow that they discussed on the Fun preview? Garth said, I don't see why not. That's not so hard to do. It should be an easy thing to do. It's just kind of a come on and get off your butt. But right again, they're in the middle of the anthology, and that's kind of front and center right now. But there is going to be a lot of Garth and Trisha stuff there since they've been singing together since 88, 89, he said. So there's going to be definitely some stuff with Trisha in the second half of the 90s, thus in the anthology too. He talked about jumping from arenas to stadiums, and he can't really imagine hearing Shallow anywhere but in a stadium. Seventh question asked, when you first heard Live Again, were you able to relate to it on a personal level, or did you just love the song because you knew many of us would relate to it? Garth said, here's the deal. On the second anthology, you started to read the interview from guys like Lay, who wrote That'll Wind. They say, this guy knows who he is, and they're talking about me, or they're talking about Garth, and they say, this guy knows what he wants. And then Garth mentions that you start to think that I don't know if I know who I am or what I want, but I know this. As a fan, I know what I want. And then when I heard You Have to Die to Live Again, I just thought, oh my gosh, the whole Beatle-esque thing in the front. And then there's Sir Paul meets Billy Joel on a demo. Oh, what a beautiful song, Garth mentions. The eighth question asked, they're pumped for Ohio in September. Will you bring back the hat tip for Friends in Low Places? Garth said, oh yeah, I think we do anyway. Ninth question asked, do you have any fond memories to share about what you're going to do with a cowboy from the studio? This person was sending a video Ask Garth in to talk about the song, and they had recently heard it for the first time. Garth mentions how they actually did the song in Cheyenne at the 100th Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo. Everything at that time was going their way, and he meant everything, so he's up there strutting and having fun like he's having a real good time. And Chris Ledoux walked out on stage, and he said the audience went to a level that he's never seen before and he's never seen since. He played it together with Chris Ledoux at Cheyenne, and Chris was there because Garth wasn't sure he'd be able to play. He thought he'd have to fly home because they were going to have Allie, and Chris Ledoux came up there with his gear, all of his guys, and was going to sit in for us. And then he came out there on stage after they knew they were going to be able to go sing, and things just went whoa with the crowd, Garth said. Garth mentions, when I got to do a duet with Chris Ledoux, I'll put it right up there with getting to do a duet with George Jones. If I'd ever got to do a duet with Haggard or Whitley, that's Chris Ledoux. Just love him. It's cool that you heard that. It's just a fun song. They talked a little bit about the belt buckle Garth got from the 100th Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo, and about how he wears it everywhere and he'd always wanted a belt buckle. The 10th question asked, what has been the hardest song to write or record over the span of your entire career? Garth says right away it's not the same song. The hardest song to write is probably still unwritten. Pretty cool song with no title, and he said they talked about it before, and then he plays the song acoustically to where it stops. The hardest song to ever record, he said, was Send 'Em On Down the Road, and he sings snippets of it and chokes up. The 11th question asked, just wondering what you can tell us about your plans for the tour in 2022. Garth mentions what's happening in the summer of 2022, how we end the studio tour will not be moved, so they are going to end the studio tour in the summer of 2022. That is, once they get back out and started on the stadium tour. He didn't know how to say it except to use a phrase his dad had said, and that was that it'll be nothing but a-holes and elbows, meaning that it's just going to be everything flying around, moving. He mentions how you want to make sure everyone's safe, but he can tell us that if they drop the green flag and let them go back to performing concerts, what's going to happen after that will be maybe the hardest sprint Garth has ever gotten into, and he's lived through the 96 to 98 tour and the 2014 comeback tour. He also mentions that it is going to end in the summer of 2022, and he'd have to tell us how it's going to end, but he can't. The 12th question asked, basically someone was mentioning how they were at Belmont College in Tennessee and Nashville with their daughter for a college visit, and they went sightseeing and saw the Bluebird Cafe. The question was, did you have any special memories or a favorite memory of that place? Garth mentions, oh yeah, I'm sitting up there, and this guy's really cool. He's up there. I'm watching him. He's kind of got this thing about him. He's really laid back. It's like he was born on stage. He kind of just up there opening up his heart, sharing. And there were probably 10 or 12 people in there. And he sings a song and says, oh, here's another one that'll never get cut. And that song changed my life. And then Garth goes in and sings a bit of the dance. He mentions how it was a great night. He went up to him and after the show and talked to him. And that's when he met Tony Arata. And then he mentions Pat Alger and I were working one day. And we couldn't work long because they had a gig at the Bluebird that night. So they had started a song and they went to the Bluebird. Everyone's sitting around and he's like, hey, should we try the new song out? And Pat started playing the song and the room kind of just shrunk down. And when he got to the sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers part, the audience started clapping. And the Bluebird is known as a quiet room. But when he got to the end of the first chorus, the entire place was clapping. And Garth was like, it won't happen. But that was also the first time he said that he went, holy cow, there might be something to that song. The 13th question asked, have you and the Queen ever thought of doing a podcast? Would love to hear the two of you talking about country music and love and life itself. Garth mentions, I don't know if they allow marital spats on a podcast, but I can't imagine me and Miss Yearwood talking for more than 5 minutes without somebody going, really? That's how you see it? But he also mentioned any time he gets to spend with her is great. They talk about spending time with Trisha Yearwood and turning into each other during COVID, but he did say a podcast would be fun, and everyone's doing them. Samantha mentions the Garth Channel, that they could do something there, and that leads Garth to saying how his favorite time on the Garth Channel so far was the 7th of February this year, where they didn't play a single Garth song for an entire 24-hour time period, but Garth was able to pick the songs and develop the list for the entire 24 hours. After talking about his favorite time on the Garth Channel so far, Garth said his goodbyes and the show ended. Hey, if you were a member of the PlanetGarth.com message forums that recently went down and you would like a place to maybe reestablish or continue your Garth fandom online, then send your email from PlanetGarth.com and your username from PlanetGarth.com to GarthCast@Mac.com or to GarthCop@Gmail.com, and we will pass along your information to Spud, also known as Garth Medic, from the PlanetGarth.com admin team. Hopefully we can reestablish a little bit of the presence for Garth fandom that PlanetGarth.com used to be. Closing out this week's GarthCast will be a cover of the song Ireland, performed by Steve Howard. An incredible job, Steve. Way to go. As always, for the GarthCast, keep believing.
They say Mother Earth is breathing with each wave that finds the shore. Her soul rises in the evening for to open twilight's door. Her eyes are the stars in heaven, watching o'er us all the while. And her heart, it is in Ireland, deep within the Emerald Isle. We are 40 against hundreds, someone else's bloody war. We know not why we're fighting, we're dying for. They will storm us in the morning when the sunlight turns the sky. Death is waiting for its dance now. Fate has sentenced us to die. Ireland, I am coming home. I can see your rolling fields of green and fences made of stone. I am reaching out. Won't you take my hand? I'm coming home. Ireland. Oh, the captain, he lay bleeding. I can hear him calling me. These men are yours now for the leading. Show them to their destiny. As I look up all around me, I see the ragged, tired and torn. And I tell them to make ready, 'cause we're not waiting for the Lord. Ireland, I am coming home. I can see your rolling fields of green and fences made of stone. I am reaching out. Won't you take my hand? I'm coming home. Ireland. Now the fog is deep and heavy as we forge the dark in fear. I can hear their horses breathing as in silence we draw near. And there are no words to be spoken, just a look to say goodbye. I draw a breath and the night is broken as I scream our battle cry. Ireland, I am coming home. I can see your rolling fields of green and fences made of stone. I'm reaching out. Won't you take my hand? I'm coming home. Ireland, oh, I am home. Ireland, yes, I am home. Ireland. We were 40 against 100,